The text arrived at 3:17 p.m., a Tuesday, the day before my son's wedding. Mom insists on dinner tonight. 7 p.m., Alina, will you come? Andrew's words, meant for his fiancée, landed in our family group chat by mistake, and my heart sank, a heavy, cold stone in the depths of me. I'd spent 30 years building a home around him, Sunday dinners, loud laughter, the smell of garlic clinging to our walls in Boston's North End, a scent so ingrained it was the very perfume of my life. Now this woman, this calm, self-assured stranger, was taking him away. I typed a reply, my fingers clumsy on the screen, the words, "No, it's fine, another time," forming and then vanishing. I deleted it, my thumb hovering. Tonight was my last chance to hold on to him, to show her she couldn't just waltz into my world and rewrite it with her quiet efficiency. But what I didn't know, standing in my kitchen, the air thick with the scent of simmering marinara, a recipe from my mother, from her mother, was that Alina was ready for me. She had a secret, a weapon she'd wield with a smile, and by the end of the night, I'd be the one undone. My own armor turned against me. If you've ever felt your family slipping through your fingers, your identity crumbling because the role you've played for decades is suddenly being recast without your consent, subscribe to this channel. My story is one of many here, and hearing how others navigate these painful, necessary transformations might just give you the strength to face your own. My name is Lucia Moretti, 58, a daughter of Italian immigrants who carved out a life in Boston with calloused hands and stubborn hearts. My home is my kingdom, walls stained with the ghosts of 1,000 Sunday gravies, floorboards that creak with the memory of Andrew's first steps, the air heavy with the scent of rosemary from my window box, and a love that was sometimes too fierce, too loud. My husband Robert and I built this life, a loud, messy, beautiful world of tradition, heated arguments that ended in laughter, and a loyalty that was as unyielding as the winter ice on the Charles River. Andrew, our only child, was the sun we orbited. When he brought Alina Carter home, I felt a crack in that world, a hairline fracture that ran straight through the foundation of my heart. She was lovely, there was no denying it. Sleek blonde hair that fell in a perfect smooth curtain, eyes the color of a summer sky, a project manager with a corner office and a handshake that was firm and direct. But she was still, so still. Where our family was a roaring, crackling fire, she was a calm, cool lake. She observed everything with those steady blue eyes, taking notes without ever writing a word down. And her silence felt like a judgment. She makes him happy. "Lucia," Robert said, his voice a low, comforting rumble from behind his morning coffee mug, his thumb tracing the familiar chip on the handle. But happiness wasn't the point. It felt like a flimsy, insufficient word. Her independence, her cool self-sufficiency, felt like a direct challenge to the life I had chosen, the life of a wife and mother. I'd poured everything, my dreams, my energy, my very soul into this family. Who was I if Andrew didn't need me? Who was this woman who seemed to need no one, who entered a room full of noise and simply absorbed it undisturbed? The wedding was tomorrow. My kitchen was a fortress, a bastion of love and control, filled with the warm, sweet smell of baking biscotti and the rich, deep aroma of a sauce that had been simmering since noon. A $200 bouquet order had been confirmed that morning, the receipt tucked into the frame of the fridge. I checked my phone, the screen cool and impersonal in my warm, flour-dusted hand. Andrew's text, "Alina's coming. Be nice, Mom." The word stung, a sharp, immediate pain. Be nice, as if I was a difficult child to be scolded, as if the ferocity of my love was a problem to be managed. I smoothed my best cream-colored blouse, the lace trim catching the soft afternoon light filtering through the lace curtains, and adjusted my mother's gold pendant, the metal warm against my skin. I wanted to look unassailable, a matriarch in her prime. Robert set the table with our holiday silver, the clink of each fork and knife, a familiar rhythmic sound. His movements were quiet, steady, a rock in the turbulent sea of my emotions. "She's just a girl." "Lucia," he said, his voice soft, catching my eye in the dark. reflective surface of the china cabinet. "She's taking him away," I replied, my voice sharp as a knife's edge, the fear making the words come out harsher than I intended. The doorbell chimed at 7 p.m. Exactly. A sound that usually meant family, but tonight felt like a summons. Robert opened the door, and Alina's voice floated in, clear and light as a bell. "Thank you for having me, Robert." She stood in the hallway, a silhouette against the fading evening light. Her navy dress was pressed to perfection, not a crease out of place, her hair in a low, severe bun that accentuated the elegant line of her neck. She looked like she'd walked out of a corporate boardroom, not the joyful, chaotic final hours of a bride-to-be, Dinga. "Hello," I said, my smile brittle, feeling the cracks forming at the corners of my mouth. "That dress, it's so thin. Aren't you cold?" A petty, poorly aimed dart, disguised as motherly concern. Her blue eyes held mine, unflinching, and I felt seen in a way that was deeply uncomfortable. "Good evening, Lucia. I'm perfectly fine. Thank you for inviting me." No warmth, no girlish nervousness, just a calm, infuriating assurance. Then Andrew appeared from the kitchen, his face transforming, lighting up at the sight of her in a way that made my breath catch. He kissed her cheek, a simple domestic gesture, and the intimacy of it was a blade twisting in my chest. "Let's eat," he said, his arm slipping around her waist, guiding her to the dining room as if he were the host in my home. The table was my masterpiece, my symphony. Vibrant antipasti, prosciutto-wrapped melon that was sweet and salty on the tongue, olives glistening like dark jewels in a ceramic bowl, a loaf of crusty bread I'd kneaded with my own hands at dawn. But as we sat, the weight of the polished silver feeling foreign in my grip, I felt my world slipping through my fingers like sand. I asked polite questions about the wedding, the flowers, the caterers, but her answers were efficient, final. The florist set, the menus finalized. Each statement was a closed door, bolted shut against my offers of help, my recipes, my eager, desperate hands. Robert, my gentle peacemaker, tried to lighten the mood, asking about her favorite book. They talked poetry, a world of abstract beauty I had no time for. Andrew shared a story about getting lost in the public garden as a kid, and they laughed, a warm, unified sound that excluded me. My smile felt hollow, a painted-on mask, and the cheerful clink of forks against my grandmother's china was deafening. Beneath the polite chatter, the tension coiled between Alina and me like a taut steel wire, humming with unspoken words, then dessert. My tiramisu, layers of espresso-soaked ladyfingers and mascarpone, the sharp tang of lemon zest cutting through the richness. Andrew's phone buzzed on the table, a jarring modern sound. "It's the DJ confirming the first dance song," he said, a boyish grin on his face as he stepped out onto the balcony, the cool night air whispering into the room. Robert, sensing the dangerous shift in the atmosphere, mumbled something about brewing a fresh pot of coffee and retreated to the kitchen. It was just us. The air thickened, growing heavy. The only sound was the slow, deliberate ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, each tick a measure of the silence. I watched her, this serene invader sitting in my son's chair, and a reckless, bitter impulse took hold of me. As Robert returned, the rich aroma of coffee trailing him, I leaned toward him, my voice dropping to a low, confidential murmur, the Italian sharp and guttural in my throat. "Guarda come si siede, così composta. Crede di essere sopra di noi, vero? Che siamo rumorose e troppo semplici. Look at how she sits, so composed. She thinks she's above us, doesn't she? That we're too loud, too simple." Robert's chuckle was a nervous reflex, his eyes darting toward Alina and then away, quickly. I expected to see confusion, the polite, slightly embarrassed smile of someone who knows they're being talked about but doesn't understand. It was a cheap victory, a coward's move, but in that moment it felt like the only power I had left. Then she moved. My heart stuttered to a stop. Alina didn't flinch or look away. She simply stood up. The sound of her chair scraping gently against the oak floor was loud in the silence. She walked around the table, her steps deliberate, each one echoing the frantic beat of my heart. She stopped beside me and I could smell the faint, clean scent of her perfume, something citrus and uncomplicated. She reached down and took my hand, the one resting limply beside my dessert plate. Her skin was cool, her grip firm but not unkind. She looked directly into my eyes, her smile steady, not warm but not cruel either. And then she spoke in flawless, beautiful Italian, the kind spoken in Milan's elegant piazzas, not the dialect of my mother's warm, crowded kitchen. Ho capito tutto, she said, her voice as clear and smooth as glass. You're worrying for nothing. I won't ask you for a single penny. I know how to provide for myself and care for the people I love. The room tilted, the colors and sounds blurring into a nauseating swirl. My painted-on smile collapsed completely. Shock froze the blood in my veins, followed by a hot, sharp flare of irritation, and then a cold, drenching wave of shame that washed over me, leaving me trembling. She'd understood. She had understood every whispered jab, every petty, jealous word I had ever muttered to Robert, thinking it was safe, thinking it was my secret language. Robert stared fixedly at his plate, the tips of his ears burning a bright, telling red. Andrew returned, the cool night air clinging to his sweater, his cheerful expression fading as he sensed the ice in the room. "Everything okay?" he asked, his gaze darting between us. "The song's confirmed," Alina said, her voice perfectly even as she let go of my hand and sat back down, as if she hadn't just reached into my chest and shattered the fragile globe of my world. The rest of the evening was a stiff mechanical pantomime. At the door, as they left, I mumbled something about the big day tomorrow and the need to get rest, my voice flat, stripped of all emotion. She thanked me for dinner, her eyes clear, holding no smugness, no triumph, just a final, unassailable certainty. I had tried to put her in her place, and she had calmly, firmly shown me that she had her own, and it was a place of strength I couldn't touch. That night, I lay awake in the dark, the house groaning around me, her words echoing in the silence. It wasn't just the Italian, it was the sheer, breathtaking self-possession, her refusal to bend or break under my scrutiny. I'd lost the first battle, and the war for my son's heart felt not only inevitable but already lost. The wedding was beautiful, a picture-perfect day, but I moved through it like a ghost in my finest silk dress, clinging to Robert's arm as if it were a lifeline. When Andrew looked at Alina at the altar, his gaze was one of pure, unfiltered love and admiration, and it broke a piece of me I didn't know could break. At the reception, under the twinkling lights, I pulled him aside, the music muffled, my voice a tight, desperate whisper. "She's so ambitious, Andrew," I said, the words tasting like ash. "Her career, it will always come first, before you, before family." His eyes, so like my own, were full of a deep, profound sadness. "Mom, her career is a part of who she is. I love that about her. I love her. Please, you have to stop this." It wasn't a plea. It was a rejection, and it cut deeper than any anger could have. A week later, at our first Sunday dinner without them, the silence in the house was a physical presence. Alina was quieter than usual, picking at her food. After the meal, she looked at Andrew, who gave her a small, encouraging nod. She took a deep, visible breath, her shoulders squaring. "Lucia, Robert," she said, her hands folded neatly in her lap, knuckles white. "I've received a job offer. A very good one." My heart clenched, a fist of dread. "Oh," I managed, my voice dangerously calm. "Here in Boston. At another firm." "No," she said, and her gaze was direct, unflinching. "It's in Milan, a year-long project leading a new international team. They're offering full relocation, $120,000 salary, and housing is covered. Milan." The name landed like a bomb. My parents' homeland, the source of all our traditions, the place of my mother's nostalgic stories. Now it was her conquest, her next career move. It felt like the ultimate, cruelest theft. "And Andrew, I asked, my voice dropping to an icy whisper. What does he think about you dragging him across the world? I'm going with her, he said without a moment's hesitation, reaching for her hand. It's an incredible opportunity for her, for us. I can transfer a lot of my consulting work remotely, and I'll work on establishing a presence there. It's an adventure. An adventure? I snapped, the word exploding from me. You're abandoning your family, your life here, your roots for a temporary project. It's not abandonment, Mom, Andrew said, his voice firm, his jaw set in a way I recognized from his father. It's a year, 1 year. A year can become forever. I cried, my control shattering, the fear taking over completely. What happens when it fails? When it all falls apart? You'll come crawling back here with your tail between your legs, and we'll be left to clean up the mess. Alina's gaze never wavered. Her voice was calm, but it carried a steely resolve that silenced me. If it fails, we'll stand up ourselves. I know how to work. I know how to live on very little. We won't be coming to you for a rescue or for money. Her words were a mirror, brutally reflecting back my own deepest fear. She didn't need me. She didn't need my son to take care of her. She was his partner, his equal, not a dependent to be kept. The argument that followed was ugly, filled with words about loyalty and priorities that I can't bear to remember. But worse than the heated words was the look in Andrew's eyes, a profound disappointment that cut deeper than any anger. They left that night, and the chasm between us felt vast and uncrossable. The weeks passed as they packed their apartment. Cardboard boxes multiplying like tumors, each one a symbol of their impending departure. I sank into a bitter, resentful silence. Robert tried to reason with me, his voice gentle but firm. He's a man, Lucia. He has to build his own life. You're going to lose him for good if you don't learn to let go. But I couldn't. The terror was a living thing inside me. I called Andrew, my voice dripping with a guilt I hoped would be an anchor. Your business contacts are all here. Your whole life is here. Italy is a massive risk. No one is waiting for you over there. I've made my choice, Mom, he said, his voice gentle but immovable like stone. I love you, but I'm separate. I have to be. The day of their departure, the airport was a temple of chaos, all flickering boards and echoing announcements. They stood together by the check-in counter, a united front against the world and against me. Robert hugged them both, pulling Andrew close, his voice thick with an emotion he rarely showed. Live your life, son. Don't waste it living out other people's decisions. Then it was my turn. I approached Alina, my pride and my pain locked in a vicious, silent war. I wanted to wound her, to leave her with a final sharp word that would linger. But when I looked into her eyes, I saw no malice, no gloating, only that same quiet strength that had so unnerved me from the beginning. The words died in my throat. I sighed, the fight draining out of me, leaving only a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. Take care of him, I whispered, the concession feeling like a defeat. He doesn't always know how to say when he needs something. I will, she said, her voice soft but sure, her hand finding Andrew's. And he takes care of me. Too, it was a revelation, those 6 words. In that moment, standing in the harsh, fluorescent light of the terminal, I understood that their relationship wasn't about one person taking care of the other. It was a mutual exchange, a partnership built on equality, not on the prescribed roles I had known and lived my whole life. We watched them walk through security, their figures growing smaller and smaller until they were swallowed by the crowd. The drive home was utterly silent. The house, when we entered, felt enormous, empty, and so silent for the first time. The familiar, comforting sense of my cooking now smelled only of loss. The first few weeks were the hardest. The silence was a physical weight. I'd find myself setting the table for 4 out of habit, the 4th place setting a stark, empty accusation. Robert gave me space, his quiet presence a constant, gentle pressure on my heart. Then a message came. It was from Alina, a simple, unadorned sentence. We arrived safely. The apartment is small but bright. Attached was a picture of a sun-drenched living room, walls the color of pale bato, with empty terracotta flower boxes on a small wrought iron balcony. There was no accusation, no gloating. Just a fact, a rope thrown across the chasm I had dug. I stared at that picture for a long time, tracing the lines of the balcony with my eyes, imagining the light, the sounds, the air. She had reached out. She had offered a connection. I didn't reply that day or the next. My pride was a stubborn stain, but the image of that bright, empty balcony stayed with me, a tiny pinprick of light in the dark fog of my self-pity. A week later, another message, a photo of a vibrant outdoor market, stalls overflowing with vivid reds and greens, with the caption, "Learning the difference between Parmigiano Reggiano and Grana Padano. It's harder than it looks." It was a peace offering, an invitation into their new world, a shared joke about the very heritage I had tried to wield as a weapon. My fingers trembled as I typed a reply. It took me 10 minutes to write 3 sentences. The real Parmigiano has a sharper, nuttier taste. Look for the pinpricks on the rind. Grana Padano is milder. It was all I could manage, a handful of words thrown back across the ocean. But that small, stilted exchange became a thread, fragile but holding. She would send snippets of their life, a short, blurry video of a tram clattering past their street, a picture of a comically lopsided plate of pasta Andrew had attempted to cook. I started to look forward to these digital postcards. I saw my son in these images, laughing in a piazza I recognized from my mother's faded photographs, his arms slung around his wife's shoulders. He looked happy, truly, deeply, uncomplicatedly happy, and Alina was there, not as a separate entity, but as the center of that happiness, her smile easy and genuine. The bitterness I had clung to began to curdle, then to dissolve into a deep, shameful regret. I had been so wrong. I had mistaken her strength for coldness, her independence for a threat. I had tried to control my son's love because I was terrified of losing my own place in his life. And in doing so, I had almost destroyed it. One evening, I was in my kitchen, the scent of rosemary from my window box filling the air, the same scent that had filled my mother's kitchen. I thought of the empty flower boxes on Alina's balcony in Milan. An idea, fragile and terrifying, began to form. I went up to Andrew's old room, the room that was now a shrine to a boy who was a man, and found an old, dust-covered Italian grammar book from his college days. I brought it down to the kitchen table, the same table where I had thrown my petty, jealous words, and I opened it. I would learn, not just the kitchen Italian of my childhood, the dialect of recipes and endearments and sharp remarks. I would learn her Italian, the fluent, elegant, proper language she had used to so deftly put me in my place. I would learn to speak her language, not as a surrender, but as a bridge, built plank by painful plank. It was slow, frustrating work. My tongue, so agile with the familiar rhythms of my dialect, struggled with the proper grammar, the formal constructions I had never needed. Robert would watch me sometimes, my brow furrowed in concentration, my lips moving soundlessly over the unfamiliar phrases, and a small, sad but hopeful smile would touch his face. He never interrupted, never asked what I was doing. He knew. In December, as a cold, gray damp settled over Boston, a thick paper letter arrived with Italian postage. Alina's handwriting was neat and precise on the envelope. I opened it at the kitchen table, my heart pounding a nervous rhythm against my ribs. It was 2 pages. The first was a confession. She wrote about her own fears when she first met me, about wanting so badly to be accepted, about the deep, quiet pain of my rejection. She admitted that her reveal of speaking Italian was a calculated move, a necessary way to establish a boundary she felt was crucial for her future with Andrew. She said she understood my fear of losing him, that it came from a place of deep love, but that love wasn't about holding on. It was about trusting the strength of the bond you've built. The second page was an invitation. Would you and Robert consider coming for Christmas? Even for a few days. We'd love to have you. We have a spare room. I read it aloud to Robert, my voice cracking over the words. He listened, his work-roughened hands resting on the smooth wood of the table. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment, then said, "We should go. I want Mom to see we're fine, that we're alive with a life, work, plans. We're not running from her. We're just living." We booked the tickets. Walking into their apartment in Milan was like stepping through a portal into a new world. It was small, yes, and the furniture was a little mismatched, but it was filled with light and their shared energy. There were books in both English and Italian on the shelves, a detailed map of the city pinned to the wall with colorful pushpins, and the flower boxes on the balcony were now filled with winter herbs, rosemary, thyme, sage. The awkwardness was there, a palpable thing in the air we all breathed, but we navigated it carefully, like people walking on a frozen lake, testing the ice with each step. Robert helped Andrew assemble a new bookshelf, their voices a low murmur of instruction and collaboration. I helped Alina in the kitchen, showing her the secret to a perfect ragu, the slow simmer, the pinch of sugar to balance the tomatoes, the patience it demanded. It was in that kitchen, surrounded by the smells of my childhood and the reality of her present, that the ice finally began to crack. We were alone, stirring our respective pots. She was pouring tea and fumbled with the sugar bowl, sending a cascade of white crystals scattering across the dark wood counter. I wordlessly handed her a damp napkin, and our eyes met over the small, messy disaster. And we laughed. It was a real, unforced, breathy sound that seemed to break the last of the tension holding us captive. "I didn't mean to offend you that night," I said, the words coming out in a rush, fueled by the vulnerability of the moment. I wanted to protect Andrew from any potential pain. I think I often confuse protection with control." She looked at me, her blue eyes soft, the steady gaze now holding understanding. "I'm not perfect either, Lucia. I make mistakes too. But Andrew and we talk. That's the most important thing we have." I nodded, my throat almost too tight to speak. Then, taking a deep, shaky breath, I ventured into my new, clumsy Italian. "Sto ancora imparando," I said, slowly and carefully, each syllable a conscious effort. "I am still learning. Ma voglio parlare la tua lingua." "But I want to speak your language." Her smile then was the warmest, most genuine I had ever seen from her. It lit up her whole face, reaching her eyes, and it was better than any apology, any grand gesture. It was a new beginning, written in a language we were both slowly learning to share. The Christmas was simple and warm, filled with the scent of pine and citrus from the panettone. We drank tea from their simple ceramic mugs, and we talked. Really talked. I listened, truly listened, to stories about her work, her team, the challenges and quiet triumphs of building a life in a new country. I saw the pride in Andrew's eyes when he spoke about her accomplishments. I saw the man my son had become, confident, supportive, happy, and I was proud too. The pride was a clean, bright feeling, untarnished by jealousy. The year flew by after that. Our digital messages transformed from simple updates into shared moments. She'd send me a photo of a complex recipe she found online. I'd send back a video of me attempting it in my Boston kitchen, flour dusting my phone camera. We became like students in a distant, joyful culinary correspondence course. Robert and Andrew started having weekly video calls, discussing business, baseball, the mundane details of life that build connection. The physical distance didn't shrink, but the emotional connection deepened, growing stronger and more resilient. In the spring, during one of our weekly video calls, Alina's face was lit with a secret radiant joy. She held up a small white plastic stick with 2 clear pink lines. "We're pregnant," Andrew said, his voice breaking with emotion, his own eyes shimmering with unshed tears. I covered my mouth with my hand, a sob catching in my throat, tears instantly filling my own eyes. A grandchild, a new life that would be part of me, part of Andrew, and part of her. The circle wasn't breaking. It was expanding, growing wider and more inclusive, and I was being invited in. They came home for a visit before the baby was born. Their bodies angled toward each other in a way that spoke of a deep, private understanding. I was no longer the fearful, controlling Lucia, the Lucia of my own making. I was just Lucia, learning, trying, loving. One afternoon we walked through the Boston Common, the leaves just beginning to turn. I held Alina's hand, her fingers laced with mine, and I felt no need to control or criticize. I felt only a profound, humbling gratitude for this strong, remarkable woman who loved my son with a fierce, equal love and who was, in her own way, giving me a new name to cherish, Nonna. Letting go wasn't a loss. It was the first step onto a bridge we had built together from our broken stones, a structure strong enough and beautiful enough to hold us all. Have you ever had to let go of someone you loved? Not because you wanted to, but because it was the only way to truly love them. Share your story below. I'm listening. And if this journey from a place of fear to a place of acceptance resonated with you, subscribe for more stories of second chances and the bridges we build to find our way back to each other.